Welcome to my channel and thank you for choosing to watch this video. Dear viewer, today's episode is a summary of all those most crucial discoveries and experiences that ultimately helped me achieve full self-awareness. Therefore, with this episode, I really hope to clear your mind even more and thus help you take the next powerful steps towards your own truth. So today, among other things, you will learn what the purpose of life really is and how you can achieve it. And for this purpose, I divided this recording into 3 parts. Therefore, in the first part of this recording, I explain what exactly does it mean to have a purpose in life and why we all should strive for its completion. The second part, on the other hand, is a collection of all the most important issues that I have only mentioned in my previous episodes. And so this time, by listing one by one, I explain briefly but specifically their deep meaning. Because as you will soon find out for yourself, without this knowledge, there is no chance for further development. Whereas in the third part of this episode, I will make a summary, which I hope will also become an inspiration for you to continue working on yourself and also encourage you to fully commit to your spiritual development. And last but not least, you will find out what awaits you in the next upcoming episode. So, let us begin. Have you ever asked yourself what it really means to have a purpose in life? Do we all have it? And if so, how do we find out what's ours? Because I, as you probably already know from my previous episodes, had a moment in my life when I was literally faced with this question. And more precisely, I'm talking about the moment when one evening, returning from work, I noticed an information board in the front of the Baptist church, and on it, the inscription saying, "And what is the purpose of your life?" And these words, I remember, struck me so hard that as a result, they changed my life by 180 degrees. Or rather, my approach to life, I should say. Therefore, let me explain why this issue is so important. So let's start first with the fact that the purpose I'm talking about has nothing to do with the personal whims of the ego, which means satisfying the needs resulting from unconsciously adopted views and beliefs. Or in other words, personal achievements related to valuing one's ego. So that's not what I'm talking about. Because what I mean is something much deeper than that. So when I talk about the purpose of life, I mean our destiny, which is something that we gave ourselves even before we were born. And this type of purpose is primarily related to our spiritual development. And here, however, when I say spiritual development, I mean development through selfless service to one's neighbor. And now you're surely wondering, what does selfless service to your neighbor even means? Well, let me explain. Each of us performs a specific duty in our everyday life. And such an obligation is some form of service. So for example, at work, we serve clients. So we say that we provide a service depending on what we do professionally. But in the case of this type of service, we charge a fee for it, right? so we have an interest in it. However, when we talk about selfless service to our neighbor, we say that it's a service performed for another without charging a fee. And this is what we call a good deed. A deed which doesn't result from duty, but from our willingness, and so our free will. And here, as an example, we can give, for example, I take my family on vacation, or I help my work colleague with his duties. I play with my pet. I take care of him. I feed him. I offer my help to someone in need. I volunteer. I take on someone's responsibilities. Or in general, I'm socially active. And so on. Therefore, the life purpose of each of us is actually spiritual development through selfless service to our neighbor. And so, the more such good deeds we do, the more we develop spiritually. But that's not all, because such goal must be much more precise. And this means it must be consistent with our individual needs in order to help us in our development. After all, each of us is at a completely different stage, and that's why our needs will differ from one another. Therefore, despite the fact that we're all striving for the same goal, the way or path by which we achieve it will be significantly different from the way or path of another person. Also due to the fact that we all have totally different skills, abilities and talents. Okay, so the question is, how do we find out how we can accomplish our purpose? First of all, we will have to find out who we really are under the layers of all the masks that we once created. Because thanks to this, we'll be able to connect with our inner self, which already knows all the answers we need. And to do that, we must first experience an inner transformation through purification. And that means we will have to disconnect from all our existing views and beliefs. Because without it, there is no chance for any change, let alone for fulfilling our purpose. And that's what all these recordings were made for. So that on the basis of my experiences, which by the way, I described in detail, you could undergo your own transformation. And thanks to this, you could find out who you really are, what is your life's purpose, and finally, how you can fulfill it. And as the cases vary, I also expect that there will also be people who will say that they don't want to change anything in their lives. And that's absolutely fine. After all, the path of spiritual development is not the simplest one. But let me ask you, does a life full of disappointments, failures, pain or suffering bring relief to a person? Rather not. So believe me, my dear friend, you want this change. Because such change means a complete purification of so-called karma and the closure of old negative cycles. And this means that you will finally be able to heal your old wounds, and you will even be able to look at your past actions from a completely different perspective. And this in turn will be very beneficial for your development. Promise. However, if you don't do this, you simply will not fulfill your, or rather our, purpose. Is there any punishment for this? Absolutely not. But tell me, why repeat the same cycle and relive life full of pain and suffering if you can actually end it now and finally experience relief? So to make it even easier for you to decide what you're actually going to do with your life, I would tell you one more thing. Finding your life purpose and devoting yourself to its completion gives you a sense of inner peace and fulfillment. So in fact, you don't even feel like you're sacrificing yourself to do something because you do it with love and passion. What's more, by doing it, you act out your service to your neighbor. And thanks to this, as I said, you grow and elevate to higher levels of spiritual understanding. And this is what Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, or all other great spiritual teachers did. Thanks to self-awareness and the fulfillment of the life purpose through selfless service to one's neighbor, they have become such powerful beings. And guess what? You can achieve it too. This is what all these holy books were written for. The Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, all of these books were made to teach us step by step how to become this greater version of ourselves, to finally live fully consciously, which means in peace, love, tranquility, fulfillment, and happiness. In the past, I have said many times that nothing in life happens by accident. I also said that every experience has its purpose and meaning, and that all events that take place both in the world around us and directly in our lives are a part of a great plan. And I repeated it, not by accident, because that's how programming actually works. You keep repeating something over and over until it is remembered and assimilated in the mind, and thus becomes something familiar. In other words, once you have observed some new information, the next time, even if you hear something similar, but with the same meaning, you will immediately take it as confirmation of what is already encoded in you. On the other hand, if I didn't repeat myself, surely everything I have talked about so far today still wouldn't make sense to you. And it wouldn't make sense because the information I gave you would be still too fresh for your mind to understand, because it is something completely new to you. So there would be a conflict or a contradiction in your mind because the information provided wouldn't match the information already encoded in you. So let me give you an example for you to understand clearer. Until now, you believed that you are your own body and that you only have one life. And you believed so because that's what you were told back in your childhood. So that's how you were programmed. Then suddenly I appear saying that you're not your body and that you're immortal. Moreover, I tell you that you're going through a process of reincarnation, and so you're returning to Earth, but each time in a completely different form. So something completely different from what you have believed so far, right? Therefore, the person who hears such statement for the first time will react from the point of view of the ego first, which means that it will be guided only by the information that was already encoded in them. So such person will say, for example, "What's this nonsense? It can be true, Isabella." And do you know why they will say that? Because such person is detached from his own nature. So it ignores its own intuition and follows only logic. And by intuition, I mean that voice of the heart, or an inner voice that already know the truth. So my task is to help you reconnect with your natural self so that you can cleanse yourself of all old beliefs and at the same time make room for new ones. But also to help you awaken your extra senses, because they will actually help you absorb a new knowledge with much greater understanding. Therefore, let me explain to you once again what's happening in our mind during the programming process. So at the beginning, you receive an impulse coming from the outside. So for example, you hear some words. And as you hear it, you automatically make sense of it based on the information that was already encoded in you. Then you filter that information and make a selection, identifying which information is less and which is more relevant. Then you encode or memorize this more important information, at the same time getting rid of the less important. And lastly, you give it a whole new meaning. So as a result, you either assimilate this new knowledge because you trust that it makes sense and therefore to be true, or you simply reject it because it doesn't agree with your beliefs. And here I would like to distinguish two completely different cases of a person who rejects new knowledge. So, case number one. Even though I intuitively sense it might actually make sense, I reject it because I am not ready for it yet. And case number two. I am not aware of any other reality. Therefore, I unconsciously accept other people's views and beliefs encoded in me as my own. And this means that such person rejects new knowledge because that knowledge doesn't agree with his programmed beliefs. Okay, so let's summarize this. Programming is a process that occurs consciously, unconsciously, or subconsciously in one's mind. It's a process of encoding information that later becomes the source of our knowledge. And faced with this encoded knowledge, we create consciously or unconsciously our reactions and behaviors. Reprogramming, on the other hand, is a process that takes place in stages according to the pace of our development. So it can be said that it's a continuous process that actively takes place in us as we move to the next stages of our inner transformation. And such process begins with recognizing all the negative patterns and beliefs we reproduce in our daily lives, and more precisely, all the beliefs and patterns that were passed down to us in our early childhood, especially those that don't serve us. And so once we recognize them, our next step is to disconnect from the old ones and reprogram them to something completely new. That is, consciously created beliefs and patterns that will now support our development. Self-awareness is a state of mind in which a person recognizes the internal phenomena and sensations taking place in them. In other words, at one point we become both the observer and an experiencer. And this means that we are aware of our own thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires, possibilities, and thus our potential. But also blockages bad habits, negative patterns, and limiting beliefs. On the other hand, self-awareness in the spiritual sense also means an enlightenment when we become aware of our own nature and origin. Thus, thanks to self-awareness, we get to know ourselves and our own needs. And this means that we perceive what serves and what doesn't serve our development. So here we can say that with such knowledge, we can fully consciously build our lives so that everything is only in our favor. Another important point to consider is our feelings. Feelings that are the product of our mind. Because it's actually the feelings that determine what label we will stick to all the information we receive from the outside. Therefore, it's essential for us to know that each feeling has its own individual frequency. So now, depending on whether it's pleasant or unpleasant feeling, that frequency rate will either increase or decrease. And this given frequency is otherwise called vibrating energy. So that's why we often say that something has either a positive or a negative energy. What's more, the feelings we create while being energy, they automatically become our aura. In other words, the vibrating energy that emanates from us. And that's why it's important that we always pay attention to all the feelings we create, because they actually reflect how others will perceive us and how comes they will sense it. So the more positive feelings we create, the higher the vibration of our own energy. In turn, the more all sorts of negative feelings we create, the more our energy levels will decrease. And that's why I said it's important that we at least try to stay in the present as often as possible, because thanks to this, we'll be able to fully feel the emotions we create, but also we'll be able to control them. Therefore, my friend, remember to always try to consciously look at the essence of all things, so that you'll be able to judge whether your emotions are really in line with reality. Because, as we well know, unfortunately, in everyday life, we often react to some impulse, which is why we often unnecessarily create negative feelings. And these feelings, in turn, as a result, lower our energy levels and thus our well-being. So to summarize, by becoming a self-aware person, it would be much easier for us to control our emotional state, which, as I have already said, is felt by others in the form of energy emanating from us, or an aura, as you prefer. Okay, so now let's explain even more deeply what this aura actually is. So the aura is a vibrating, emanating energy that creates around the physical body our own magnetic field. And here I would like to point out that the magnetic field of each of us is different from each other. And this is because of the frequency, which can be, as I said, low or high, depending on the degree of our purification. And although in fact every living being has its own magnetic field, unlike plants, in humans and animals, the greatest role actually plays the emotional state. That's why I said earlier that it's important, extremely important, that we always pay attention to all the feelings we create. And what's more, the aura is, in a sense, a protective barrier thanks to which we defend ourselves against the penetration of some evil energies coming from lower frequency beings. So also thanks to the aura, we attract people of similar or even the same frequency with whom we say we resonate energetically. In this case, when I talk about manifestation, I mean attracting something or the appearance of something in our lives. We say that something has manifested itself, which means it has appeared. Therefore, in our case, we will talk about manifestation of dreams, and so attracting someone or something into our life. So, in order for our dreams to manifest, we must first understand what the law of attraction is and how does it work. And here I would like to emphasize that the so-called by people law of attraction is actually the way our universe works. And now when I say universe, I also mean so-called God, who is omnipresent. Because as you will soon find out for yourself, during the whole process of spiritual path of self-development, the word God will actually change and transform, as it will take on a totally different meaning. So our universe, or God, is governed by its own laws. And the one who knows and understands them will certainly know that everything that happens in our lives is our own conscious or unconscious manifestation. Because in fact, it's we who decide about our own fate. For example, through our thoughts and feelings related to them. It is said that the human mind is capable of both self-destruction and self-healing. And surely the one who is aware of the power of his own mind certainly knows and understands this. So let me give you some examples. A person unaware of himself and his own potential gets easily influenced by the outside world. This is a fact, by the way. And thus, by reacting to any negative information in his mind, he automatically creates negative thoughts and feelings related to it. And this means that he unconsciously lowers his energy levels. And as I said before, the longer we stay in the state of mind, the faster it becomes our reality. So in other words, often creating all sorts of negative scenarios in our minds, we begin to live in fear, paranoidly afraid of what may possibly happen to us. That's the truth. And this is exactly how we unconsciously, unfortunately, manifest it into our reality. And exactly the same time will work for the positive thinking. So now, let me explain in steps how the manifesting process actually works. So, the process of manifestation begins with visualization. We must imagine something first. Then we create some specific feelings related to it. And this in turn produces energy, which is a form of communication with the universe. After all, everything in this world, within this universe, is energy. And therefore, we are energetically connected with everything. So, this is how we actually communicate in the spiritual world. Or rather, in reality, I should say. Therefore, know that our energy has a much greater meaning than the words we use. Because with words, you can lie. But try with energy. Impossible. So the so-called law of attraction states that what you give, you get back. And here you probably heard the saying, what goes around comes around. So the more good you give, the more good you get in return. Or the more evil you do to the other, the more returns to you. Therefore, you should know that when something unpleasant happens to you, it is certainly not the fault of God who punishes you for something, because God is on energy, not a person. So what actually happens is your own actions are being mirrored by the universe back to you. Therefore, in fact, it is you yourself who manifests all the pains and failures into your life. And I hope this is quite understandable. So now let me give you an example. If you focus too much on material loss, it's obvious that you cannot expect an income. However, what you can expect is only an even greater loss, because that's how it works. So to sum up, it's more profitable to be a good, honest, helpful, loving, understanding, patient, trusted, and above all, self-aware person. Because only then will you be able to take full control of your own mind and therefore of your life. And this means that you will eventually begin to consciously manifest only those positive people, things, events, or situations into your life. That's it. Spiritual awakening literally means the awakening of the individual to his true nature, which is also due to the awakening of our extra senses. And during the awakening process, we begin to fully live the present, and thus we are more able to focus on our thoughts and feelings, while at the same time recognizing their source. So we say that we connect with our inner self, which is a kind of a mediator between the material world and the spiritual world. And in turn, the result of this process is obtaining full self-awareness. So once again, we take control of our own mind, and thus we become both the observer and the experiencer at one moment. What's more, thanks to self-awareness, we have already said earlier, we are able to see our own blockages and limitations. But now we are also able to recognize their source. But that's not all, because we are also able to see our negative habits and behaviors, as well as the duplicating patterns and beliefs that are, as we said earlier, the result of our early programming. And it's actually all thanks to those awakened senses that expand and gain in strength as this whole process unfolds within us. So to sum up, spiritual awakening is the awakening of higher self, that is the light body or the soul that actually we really are, to actively participate in our daily life. And therefore, from now on, we are no longer guided just by logic, because now we make decisions more often based on our own intuition, which already knows everything. And thanks to awakening, we are able also to see both people and all events for who or what they really are. So, in other words, we are able to distinguish the reality from illusion. And we are able to distinguish it because we are fully engaged in experiencing the present. Spiritual development is also a kind of process that we can divide into stages and levels that we gain successfully according to the pace of our development and, of course, our readiness. And one of the aforementioned stages and levels don't really exist, I believe it will be much easier for a newly awake person to understand the entire process if we actually break it down into different stages and levels. So during such process, for example, we ask ourselves deep questions about ourselves, but also about life in general. And then, of course, we search for answers to them. On the other hand, thanks to our self-awareness, we are able to see hidden lessons and meaning in the events taking place in our lives. And therefore, throughout the process, we also learn to draw conclusions and learn valuable lessons from all our experiences, but also from interactions with people appearing on our path. Not by accident, by the way. We are also able to see hidden signs and valuable advice, which are actually useful help or useful tips to help us during this entire process. So to sum up, spiritual development means healing the past through understanding, learning life lessons by drawing conclusions from experiences and interactions, selfless service to one's neighbor through good deeds, internal transformation by taking conscious steps and positive actions, consistently becoming a better version of yourself by systematically working to tame your ego. But above all, it's a development of the ability to maintain a balance between life in the material world and the spiritual world. Because thanks to this, we can simultaneously experience a beautiful life here on earth while develop spiritually by learning valuable lessons precisely from all these experiences. And although the pace of our development doesn't matter at all, nevertheless, it's important that we are fully involved in this process, because the more we dedicate ourselves to it, the sooner we'll be able to gain clarity of mind and thus reach this higher or better understanding of the self. Spiritual cleansing is a process that takes place in our body. And when I say body, I mean in a physical, mental, and spiritual body. It actually means getting rid of any residual chemical toxins which manifest themselves in the form of, for example, negative thoughts and feelings resulting, of course, from unconsciously encoded beliefs, views, and negative patterns. And therefore, during such process, our mind reprograms our existing beliefs into some completely new ones, that is, those that will support our development. And thanks to this, eventually there is a complete exchange of DNA in the body, which means that we become a completely new and improved version of ourselves, and I am not joking. And if you're now asking yourself a question like, is it even possible? I can assure you that it is. Because the power of our mind is unlimited. Therefore, we are even able to reprogram our DNA. And that means getting rid of any health problems. And I am an example of this. Meditation has actually two meanings. So first, meditation is a relaxation practice used to relax and calm the mind and the body. Therefore, meditation allows the practitioner to focus on the present moment so that the practitioner is able to disconnect from the intrusive thoughts and stresses of everyday life. And thanks to this disconnection, the nerve plexuses relax and then the body can experience actually this deep relaxation. That's why we can say that this type of practice is an excellent exercise for example, concentration, relaxation, calming down our stressed mind, and with regular practice, even deep healing of the body and our mental state. If, however, we speak of meditation in the spiritual sense, we can say that it's a practice that allows us to enter a blissful state of ecstasy during which we experience a deep energetic bond with our higher self, but also with God within. And during such meditation, there is a disconnection from the external world, while allowing us to dive into our inferior, which means we can experience ourselves as an observer and an experiencer at the same time. What's more, by focusing on the present moment, we are able to achieve this blissful state of ecstasy. And this in turn enables us to have a pure flow of communication within the spiritual world, which means we are able to receive intuitive messages, that is, for example, messages communicated to us by our higher self, but also telepathic messages communicated to us by other light bodies. And this could be, for example, your mother, father, auntie, friend, soulmate, your pet, or anyone really. It is said that prayer is a conversation with God, but I would rather call it an inner monologue. And depending on what your prayer looks like and what its intention is, prayer is a form of request for help in some particular aspect of life, or it's simply an expression of gratitude. Therefore, instead of using some formal definitions, I will simply explain what prayer means to me. Every day, as soon as I wake up, the first thing I do is focus on the first thought that comes to my mind. And as I dive deeper into this thought, I start an inner dialogue. So in the beginning, I always express my gratitude. Gratitude for everything I have, but also for everything that I have achieved so far in my life. Then I ask myself some bothersome questions about something that I may not understand, but I would like to understand about that specific thought. And when I go even deeper, then I start to pay attention to my feelings and thoughts, which I then analyze, but this time aloud. And I do so because when I discuss something out loud, that's when understanding comes in. So this way, I can look at the problem from a completely different perspective. In other words, by conducting such a monologue with myself, I become an observer who at the same time also analyzes and experiences. Because in reality, talking to God actually means talking to yourself. You talk to yourself about your pains, about your cares, about your problems, or about your worries. But also, as I said earlier, you express your gratitude for something. So what happens when we talk about something out loud? We imagine it, but also create some feelings related to it, right? So in fact, through this monologue, also called by us prayer, we unconsciously or consciously manifest the physical form of what we think and what we talk about. And that's why prayer should be something very individual and personal, and not someone's repeated words. Therefore, remember to always be grateful. and complain as little as possible. Because our imaginations and the emotional words we utter are precisely the form of manifesting their physical form. So, to put it plainly, we make our spoken words and imaginations come true. Unconditional love for one's neighbor is not a feeling, but actually a state of being. It means acceptance. It means understanding, compassion, empathy, kindness, gratitude, and even support towards another being, without any conditions and interests. This kind of love is a symptom of our true nature. Therefore, when we love someone unconditionally, it means that we don't expect anything in return. Because this love, once again, is not a feeling, but a deep bond, energetical bond with all existing creation. But in order for you to understand this fully, this type of deep bond, this connection, you will first need to cleanse yourself of any toxins that are blocking your heart chakra from experiencing it. Let us start with the fact that the term God is a term derived from religious beliefs. And according to the same beliefs, God was defined as a male gender, which is why we often refer to him as he. So we say that God is the creator because he created everything that exists. And if he did create everything that exists, then he is certainly all-powerful. And here comes a contradiction. Since we said that he is the creator of everything, then why we limit him by one gender or by giving him some specific shape or form? If the truth is that God can take any form or no form at the same time, while being everything. Therefore, we should rather call it energy, both masculine and feminine energy. Energy that, thanks to its infinite possibilities, divides itself into an infinite number of light bodies or particles to be able to experience its omnipotent potential. That's why we say that God is in each of us. And therefore, it's true that we are part of all creation. And by giving itself a physical form, God can experience itself as, for example, you or me. Therefore, our task is to develop through all kinds of experiences so that we can endlessly transform and expand our awareness with new information. And thanks to this, we will be able to finally experience self-realization. And that means get to know our own nature and potential, because that's what God wants. The potential, which I said, is unlimited. Faith is not a feeling, but a sensation or state of being in which we trust what is invisible and intangible. And although in our three-dimensional reality, it is not an easy state to achieve, it is nevertheless a state that we should all strive for, because it is actually through faith that we can achieve inner harmony and salvation. To begin with, it's not easy to see any signs or clues when living in ignorance. Therefore, it will be very useful to work on ourselves so that we will cleanse ourselves of unnecessary toxins that linger in us, and thus we will be able to experience clarity of mind. And this in turn will certainly make our visibility much clearer. Okay then, so how could we spot such signs? Signs can manifest themselves in various forms, starting with the lyrics of a song playing on the radio, through a person who unexpectedly appears in our path, or perhaps some recording which allegedly, accidentally, fell into our hands. Obviously, we should know by now that nothing really happens by accident. So let me give you an example. Something bothers you, and you don't know the answer to that. And if you don't know the answer to that, then obviously you need to search for the answer. So you keep asking yourself the same question over and over again while searching for an answer to it. And then suddenly, one day, while, for example, walking, out of the blue, some stranger appears on your path, on your way. A stranger who totally unexpectedly is telling you about something you're interested in. And as you engage in this discussion, you suddenly realize that this person has just answered your question. Sounds magical, right? It truly is. Another example. This one is actually from my life. And I think I have already mentioned it earlier. So, several years ago, I had a moment when I felt terribly lost. And I don't know how I could actually change this state. I had no idea. I felt some inner cry for change, but I just couldn't see any way out of my situation. Yet, somewhere deep inside, I was asking for help. Then suddenly, one day, I saw this inscription in front of the church. And what is the purpose of your life? And it was actually this inscription that made me believe that this was all I needed. To ask myself this deep question, which in result, in fact, led me on the path of searching for my own life's purpose. So as you can see, you don't have to be an enlightened person to see the signs. Because it's enough that the next time in a difficult situation, before you fully indulge in your emotions, you simply ask yourself first, is there anything I can learn from this situation? Or perhaps it is a sign that I need to change something in my life. And so on. Many different questions. Do you understand? And then I promise you, I assure you, that the more you look at your life from the perspective of an observer, the faster you will develop this ability to read such signs. In the first part of this episode, I have already mentioned that nothing happens by accident. Therefore, everything has its purpose and meaning. However, it is really up to you how you decide to perceive your own life experiences. Because on the one hand, you can feel sorry for yourself for the rest of your life. For example, constantly complaining to others about some situations in your life, which in fact will not help you at all. Also, on the other hand, you may find that this has clearly been a lesson for you to learn, so that you would never make the same mistake again in the future. Do you understand? So now, let me remind you of how I developed this skill. An extraordinary skill, I should say. I have always told myself that life is a kind of game in which each of us plays a major role. And as it happens in games, on the way to our goal, we encounter many obstacles and challenges, which, by the way, I have always considered a great opportunity to test my own abilities. And although the experiences were very difficult, in spite of everything, instead of indulging in emotions and panicking unnecessarily, I always wondered what I could learn this time. Or perhaps this experience is just a test to see if I really learned something from, for example, my recently made mistakes. Do you understand? So as you can see, all you need is a slight shift in your perspective of perceiving, and you'll be able to learn something new. Therefore, I leave the interpretation of life events to you, while at the same time hoping that this next time you will focus only the positives, and thus that you will draw some conclusions out of it. And thanks to this, you'll be able to convince yourself of your progress in your self-development. Therefore, I believe that asking yourself deep questions and doing some little analysis of these more important events will definitely help you get through even the toughest moments. But it will also help you develop this extraordinary ability to draw conclusions and learn life lessons. For this will automatically lead you to this, say, higher levels of spiritual understanding. So it's worth working on. I believe that at some point in our lives, we have to make a choice as to whether we want to follow our own path or actually follow the crowd. However, know that no matter what choice you make, you can always change it. And frankly speaking, it's never too late for any changes. So the question is, what is this whole life experience really? Is life itself a punishment for our sins, as some people say? Is life an adventure full of unexpected surprises? Or maybe an opportunity for learning and self-development? Or perhaps a little bit of everything? Certainly, each of us will perceive our own life in a completely different way, if only based on our unlike experiences. And yet, although everyone seems to experience life in their own way, I truly believe that we all have the same goals. That is to find our peaceful place in the world, to achieve some success, to feel needed, fulfilled, loved and happy, and to ultimately achieve stability and inner harmony. But are these kinds of goals actually our own inner desires? Or perhaps we unconsciously duplicate others, thinking that we want the same for ourselves? Good question. That's why when asked about our own goals, we quickly realize that it is easier for us to talk about them than to actually complete them. Because looking at today's men subjected to constant pressure from the environment, it is really, really difficult to satisfy his needs. And that's certainly why our life looks like never-ending rat race. We still feel some deficiencies in our lives. So when we achieve one thing, we jump straight to another, because over time, the appetite grows. And it's actually difficult to tame it, especially when we surround ourselves with equally hungry people. And all this because from an early age, we were told that in order to achieve something in life, we will have to work hard for it. So we toil like this oxen as long as our health allows us to do. And when we finally deteriorate in health, it turns out that everything we have worked so hard for can be lost within just a minute. Or another scenario. Finally, after many years of hardship and sleepless nights, we managed to achieve our desired goal. And then, literally a moment later, it turns out that the joy of this achievement is only a quickly evaporating moment. And do you know why is this so? Because life itself is not waiting for anyone. It's still moving forward, and so should we. Therefore, with the passage of time, our needs or desires also change. So when we achieve one success for which we have worked so hard for, we want another one, even bigger. And to tell the truth, such cycle can go on endlessly. And do you know why? Because what you're looking for is not attainable in material form. Because what you're really looking for is a spiritual experience. And you begin to actually understand this while you go through your spiritual awakening. And then you suddenly realize that no one really is your enemy, because in reality, everyone only plays the equally important role in your life. You begin to also understand that any experience, no matter how unpleasant, is actually a valuable lesson that builds you up and shapes you into a better person. And finally, you understand that you are responsible for your own fate. You also understand that without faith in a higher power, you have no chance of achieving inner harmony. Because believing in God also means believing in yourself and your own abilities. In the course of your spiritual awakening, when you suddenly notice someone's negative patterns and beliefs that you have been repeating over the years, you suddenly realize how much it actually blocked your visibility and the possibility of development. And that's when all the magic actually happens. Suddenly, you stop fighting your feelings, because now, like never before, you have enough strength to face them. You're no longer afraid of taking risks, because now you know that in reality you have nothing to lose. And even if you lose something, you don't even pay attention to it anymore, because you trust that it was meant to be this way. Besides, when you are deprived of something, you don't really lose it, but you make room for something new to come. Something definitely better. What's more, during your spiritual journey, you also learn to detach yourself from things and people that don't serve your development anymore. And thus, it is much easier for you to let go of certain negative influences, which in turn allows you to free yourself from the bondage of your own mind. And then you also start to feel much stronger internally, because now you feel that you are finally in full control of your own mind. So you don't get nervous anymore when, for example, things don't go according to your plan, because now you understand that there is nothing you can do about it. And there is nothing you could do about it because now you know that you have no influence on external factors. Therefore, from now on, you can actually easily accept what you cannot change. Simple. And frankly speaking, I could endlessly talk about the benefits of this spiritual path and self-discovering development. That's so exciting, because all the knowledge that you will gain by diving deep within yourself cannot actually be replaced by any other knowledge. Studying and discovering oneself, including one's own abilities and talents, is a priceless experience that cannot be replaced by anything. My friend, experiencing self-realization gives you a sense of permanent happiness and fulfillment. Do you even understand how powerful this achievement is? I hope you do. Because as you will soon find out for yourself, everything that has mattered to you so far suddenly will lose its value. And do you know why? Because now you will finally understand that everything you have been looking for is and has always been already in you. Whereas during the purification process, you will experience complete clarity of mind that will now allow you to see things that you have never been able to see before. And then suddenly you will stop chasing material desires, because now you will have much greater desires, much greater needs. So instead of chasing after something, you will commit to living your life to the fullest by truly feeling like a free person. And yes, you will feel free, but above all, you will feel limitless. Because now that you are free from all limitations, nothing will stop you from following your heart's desires. Remember this. So now the question is, what every soul desires? First of all, happiness. Because it is joy that makes our energy grow. And thanks to this, we are able to positively influence the rest of creation. How beautiful is that? Therefore, answering our question, what is the purpose of our life? I will answer once again: selfless service to your neighbor. When through your own inner transformation, you can positively influence others, making them want to work on themselves so that they too can achieve self-awareness. Because only in this way we'll be able to restore long-desired peace, respect, and love for our neighbor to this world. And therefore, the job we do in our everyday life shouldn't be our compulsion or duty, but rather the opportunity to share our talents and skills. And so, when performed with love and passion, will contribute to the development of others, so that everyone will be able to get the most out of life, because when you rejoice, the whole world will rejoice with you, my dear friend. Dear viewer, you have probably learned more than once that life can often spoil our plans, but also throw us into the deep end or take away our dreams. And all this in the name of self-development. Therefore, in the next episode, I will teach you how to accept everything that happens in our everyday life with humility and understanding. And although it sounds not very favorable, I can assure you that the lesson I will teach you will certainly help you see everything in a completely different light. Promise. Therefore, I warmly invite you to follow all the upcoming episodes because we still have a lot to learn. I hope this video has motivated you to reflect on your own belief system, and thanks to this, now you'll be able to see your life from a completely different perspective. So, my dear viewer, as always, I wish you perseverance, patience, a lot of strength and determination in finding your own truth, but also gaining enlightenment and self-understanding. So if you like this video, of course I will kindly ask you to give it a thumbs up and share the link with your family and friends. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do it now so you could help me expand this channel and of course reach an even larger audience. And since every interaction counts for me, that's why I would like to thank you to all those who have been, who is, and will continue to be with me. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your time and support. And I truly hope that together we'll be able soon to change this world for the better.